I'm Jake, 35, and I've been married to Lisa, 33, for 8 years now. On paper, we're that perfect suburban couple. 2 kids, a cute little house, decent jobs. Lisa's always been outgoing and charming, the kind of person who could make strangers laugh at a party. I'm more laid back, the guy you'd find at the grill during a barbecue, quietly enjoying the moment. We met at a friend's birthday party when she was 24 and I was 26. She was like a firework, dazzling and impossible to look away from. I fell fast, and for a while life was good. But over the past year or so, something started to feel off. Lisa became less patient, snapping at me over small things. She started working late more often, though she never seemed particularly stressed. Our conversations, which used to flow so easily, became surface level. I tried telling myself that we were just in a rut. Life with 2 kids can be exhausting. But then the nagging doubts crept in. I brushed them off for months because I didn't want to believe Lisa could be unfaithful. She was my best friend, my partner. We'd built a life together. But you know how people say that gut feelings are usually right? Turns out they are. The moment everything unraveled started with something so small, it almost felt laughable in hindsight. Lisa left her phone on the kitchen counter one night while she was upstairs giving the kids their baths. Her screen lit up, and I caught a glimpse of a notification from someone named Chris. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who snoops. I've always believed in trust. But something about that name and the heart emoji next to it made my stomach twist. I told myself I was being paranoid. It's probably one of her coworkers, I thought, trying to shake the feeling. But then I remembered she'd never mentioned a Chris before. That night, while Lisa was fast asleep, I gave in. I know it's a violation of privacy, but something compelled me to check. Her phone didn't have a password. She never needed one before. So I swiped it open and navigated to her messages. What I found made my chest tighten like a vice. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, face blowing a kiss. One message read. Tonight was incredible. You're amazing, said another. My hands started shaking as I scrolled further. The texts were littered with flirty banter, inside jokes, and unmistakable innuendos. There were even a couple of pictures, nothing explicit, but enough to make my blood boil. It was clear this wasn't just an emotional affair. I didn't stop there. I went into her email and found receipts for hotel bookings on nights she'd claimed to be working late. There were even tickets to a concert. An artist she knew I hated but apparently enjoyed with Chris. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. My heart was racing, my breath shallow. I wanted to wake her up right then and scream, demand answers. But instead, I just sat there in the dark, staring at her sleeping face. How could she do this? How long had this been going on? Couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying every late night, every vague excuse, every moment that now felt like a lie. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I didn't know this woman I'd built a life with anymore. The next day, I made a plan. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I needed more information, more proof. I wanted to see how far she'd take it if I didn't say a word. So I started digging. The things I found over the next few days would make anyone's stomach churn. Took me 4 days to gather everything I needed. By then, I knew more than I wanted to. I'd learned that Chris was some divorce guy she'd met at her gym. They'd been hooking up for at least 6 months, maybe longer. I found receipts for dinners, gifts, even a necklace I'd once complimented her on. Turns out it wasn't for me treating her, as she claimed. By the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to play detective or keep pretending. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. Lisa came home from work that evening around 9 p.m., her hair slightly disheveled, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I was sitting in the living room, the lights dimmed, with a folder full of evidence on the coffee table. "Hey," she said, all casual, kicking off her heels. "Why are you sitting in the dark? Where were you tonight?" I asked, my voice sharper than I'd intended. Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "At the office. I told you I had that late meeting." I stood up, staring her down. Don't lie to me, Lisa." Her face turned defensive immediately. "What the hell is this about?" I grabbed the folder and threw it onto the coffee table. "This is about Chris. This is about all your late nights and hotel rooms. This is about you lying to my face over and over again while you screw around behind my back. Her eyes widened for a split second, and then she crossed her arms. You went through my stuff? She snapped, her tone sharp and deflective. Unbelievable. I can't even have privacy in my own house. Privacy? I laughed bitterly. You think this is about privacy? You're cheating on me. Lisa, you've been sleeping with another man? And you're worried about me looking at your phone? Are you serious right now? She didn't deny it. That's what hit the hardest. Instead, she rolled her eyes and said, You're being dramatic. Dramatic, I echoed, my voice rising. Dramatic is me throwing your crap on the lawn and changing the locks. Dramatic is me filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Don't you dare downplay what you've done to me and this family. She scoffed, her mask slipping. You don't get it, do you? You haven't exactly been husband of the year, Jake. You're boring. All you ever want to do is sit at home with your stupid TV shows or tinker in the garage. I needed excitement and Chris gave me that. He made me feel alive again. Her words hit like a slap. I stood there, stunned, as she went on. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere, she added, venom dripping from her voice. That broke me. I slammed my fist onto the coffee table, making her jump. You don't get to blame me for your choices, Lisa. I've been here trying while you've been sneaking around like a coward. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. The argument spiraled from there. She was unapologetic, deflecting every accusation, twisting the knife deeper with every excuse. By the end of it, I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry, scream, or throw something. When I finally told her to leave, she stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're kicking me out? She asked, incredulous. You bet I am. Go stay with Chris if he's so exciting. Pack your stuff and get out. Her expression hardened, but she didn't argue. She stormed upstairs, slamming the door behind her. That night, I slept on the couch, feeling like the shell of the man I'd been just a week ago. But deep down, as the rage simmered beneath the surface, a thought began to take shape, a plan. I didn't sleep much that night. While Lisa packed upstairs, I lay on the couch replaying everything in my head, the betrayal gnawing at me like a parasite. Her excuses, her unapologetic attitude. It was all so cold. I felt like a fool for ever believing she loved me. But as the hours passed, my heartbreak morphed into something sharper. Anger, sure, but also clarity. If she thought she could shatter our family and walk away with no consequences, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The first step of my plan started the next morning. She came downstairs with a couple of suitcases, barely looking at me as she muttered, I'll come back for the rest later. Take your time, I said, my tone calm, almost too calm. But just so you know, I've already called a lawyer. That got her attention. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. A lawyer? For what? For the divorce, I said simply. And for full custody of the kids. You won't get a dime of this house, and I'm going to make damn sure everyone knows exactly why. Her face twisted with anger. You can't just take the kids from me, Jake. You're delusional if you think any judge will side with you. Maybe, I said with a shrug. But you see, Lisa, I've got all the receipts. Hotel stays, your texts with Chris, the concert tickets. You've been neglecting your family for months to sneak around with him. And when the courts see all of this, do you think they'll be impressed by your excitement? She froze, her bravado faltering for the first time. I could see the gears turning in her head, realizing how much damage I could do. I'm still their mother, she said, but her voice lacked its usual bite. Yeah, and you're also the one who decided to throw this family away. You made your bed, Lisa. Now go lie in it with Chris. She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. As soon as she was gone, I got to work. First, I locked down our finances. I froze our joint accounts, transferred what I legally could into an account under my name, and canceled the credit cards she had access to. If she was going to run off with her boy toy, she wasn't going to do it on my dime. Next, I reached out to a friend who worked in IT. With his help, I set up a little surprise for Lisa. All those messages and photos she thought were private? Let's just say they weren't anymore. A carefully curated folder, detailing her affair, was sent anonymously to her boss, her parents, and yes, even Chris. Petty? Maybe. But it felt good. The cherry on top? I found Chris on social media. Turns out, he was still in the middle of his own messy divorce. I made sure his soon-to-be ex-wife received every piece of evidence I had. By the end of the week, Lisa's life was a bonfire of chaos. She lost her job. Apparently her boss didn't appreciate the office late nights. Chris's ex was dragging him through court for infidelity, and her parents, who'd always thought she was perfect, stopped speaking to her. But that wasn't the end of it. Not by a long shot. Lisa's downfall happened faster than I expected, and honestly, it was brutal to watch. By the end of the week, the once confident, unapologetic woman I'd confronted in our living room had turned into a shadow of herself. But I wasn't done yet. Not when there was still so much to unravel. 2 days after I sent the folder to her boss, Lisa showed up at the house unannounced. She looked disheveled, like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual polished appearance was gone, replaced by sweatpants and a hoodie she'd probably pulled out of a gym bag. "You ruined my life, Jake!" she shouted the moment I opened the door. I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "You ruined your own life, Lisa. I just made sure everyone saw the mess you made." She tried to push past me into the house, but I blocked her. "What are you doing?" I asked sharply. "I'm here to see the kids," she said, her voice desperate. "You don't get to just show up here whenever you feel like it," I replied. "This is still their home, and until we work out custody, you'll see them on my terms. You can't waltz in here pretending everything's fine." "You're being vindictive," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "Vindictive?" I barked out a laugh. "That's rich coming from the woman who was sneaking around behind my back for half a year while lying to my face. I'm protecting our kids, Lisa. They deserve better than this chaos you've brought into our lives." She didn't have much of a retort. Instead, she glared at me with tears welling up in her eyes before storming off. As she left, I noticed a car idling at the curb. Sitting in the driver's seat was none other than Chris. He looked out of place, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like he thought he was in some kind of spy movie. I smiled to myself and gave him a friendly wave. He didn't wave back. But Chris wasn't my problem anymore. Lisa's whirlwind romance with him had already started to crack. Word had gotten around about the affair, and his reputation was just as torched as hers. I later found out his gym membership was revoked after some members complained about his activities with Lisa. Meanwhile, I was doing everything I could to protect myself and the kids. My lawyer was a godsend, helping me craft a case so solid it would make a granite slab look flimsy. The courts would see Lisa for what she really was. A selfish, reckless partner who put her own desires above her family. And yet, for all the satisfaction I felt watching her life crumble, there was still this ache in my chest I couldn't shake. Lisa had been my best friend, the mother of my kids. And now, she was a stranger, someone I barely recognized. The worst part was explaining things to the kids. Our oldest, Emily, is 7, and she's sharp, too sharp for her own good sometimes. She'd started asking why Mommy wasn't home anymore. I tried to keep it vague, saying that Mommy needed some time away to figure things out. But one night, she looked at me with those big, curious eyes and asked, "Did Mommy stop loving us?" That question shattered me. I hugged her close and told her the truth the best way I could. "Mommy loves you very much, but sometimes adults make bad choices. It's not your fault, okay?" She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully understand. How could she? I barely understood it myself. The fallout wasn't just about me or Lisa. It was about the family we'd built, the dreams we'd shared, and the wreckage left behind. But I wasn't going to let her selfishness destroy my kids' sense of stability. And as for Lisa, she was about to learn that the consequences of betrayal don't just fade with time. A few weeks after Lisa's meltdown at the door, life was starting to settle into a new rhythm. I'd thrown myself into being a dad, making sure Emily and our youngest, Ben, had everything they needed. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. But as it turns out, the universe wasn't done throwing curveballs my way. One morning, I got a call from my lawyer. "Jake, I need you to come into the office," he said, his tone grave. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my stomach nodding. "It's about Lisa. You're going to want to see this in person." I drove over immediately, my mind racing with possibilities. When I got there, my lawyer handed me a thick manila envelope. "This was sent anonymously to my office," he said. "It's about Lisa and her boyfriend, Chris." I opened the envelope, and my heart dropped. Inside were photos, documents, and even screenshots of text messages. But this wasn't just about their affair. It was about something far worse. Chris wasn't just some divorce guy from the gym. He was a con artist. The evidence painted a damning picture. Chris had a long history of charming women, convincing them to invest money in business opportunities, and then disappearing once he drained their accounts. Lisa had apparently fallen for his routine hook, line, and sinker. The text messages were stomach-turning. In one exchange, Chris bragged to a friend about how easy it was to manipulate her. "She's so desperate for attention. It's almost pathetic," he wrote. But the real kicker? Lisa had been funneling money out of our joint account to him. Thousands of dollars. My frozen accounts had likely saved her from losing even more, but the damage was done. I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of it all crushing me. My lawyer cleared his throat. "Jake, this changes everything. Not just the divorce, but potentially criminal charges against Lisa. If she was complicit in his schemes." "She wouldn't be," I interrupted, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. "She's been reckless, yes," I admitted, my voice shaking. "But she wouldn't knowingly con people. She's not evil." But then again, how much did I really know her anymore? I left the lawyer's office with the envelope clutched in my hands, my head spinning. Part of me wanted to confront Lisa immediately, but something told me to wait. I needed to figure out my next move carefully. The twist came later that evening. Lisa called me out of the blue. "Jake," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "I need to talk to you. Can I come by?" "Why?" I asked, my tone flat. "It's important," she said, then hesitated. "I messed up. I need your help." Her words caught me off guard. Lisa never admitted to messing up. Not like this. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let her come over. When she showed up, she looked different. Broken. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she gripped her coffee mug. "It's about Chris," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's not who I thought he was. He's dangerous." I leaned back in my chair, watching her carefully. "Dangerous how?" She swallowed hard. "He's been using me, Jake. I didn't see it at first, but now it's clear. He took money, lied about everything, and when I confronted him, he threatened me. That hit me like a brick." "Threatened you how?" She looked down, her voice cracking. "He said if I told anyone, he'd ruin me. That he'd make sure I lost the kids, my reputation, everything." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Despite everything, Lisa was still the mother of my children. But then I remembered the texts, the photos, the trail of destruction she'd left in her wake. I took a deep breath, my voice steady. "Lisa, you've got to be honest with me. How much did you know about what he was doing? Did you help him con people?" Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What? No. I didn't know anything about that," she insisted. "I swear, Jake, I'm just as much of a victim as you are." I didn't know whether to believe her, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Lisa's revelation about Chris being dangerous was a twist I hadn't seen coming, but I wasn't about to trust her blindly. Still, there was something raw in her fear that made me think she wasn't lying, at least not entirely. After a long pause, I leaned forward. "If you're serious about this, Lisa, then you need to help me clean up this mess. No more lies. No more half-truths. I need everything you know about him." She nodded quickly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I'll tell you everything," she said. Over the next hour, Lisa laid it all out. Chris had charmed her with flattery and attention, filling the gaps I hadn't even realized were in our marriage. He'd convinced her to transfer him money, promising it was for investments that would pay off big. When she started getting suspicious, he brushed her off with smooth-talking excuses. But things had taken a darker turn recently. Lisa said she'd finally pressed him for details about his so-called investments, and his mask had slipped. He'd become cold, angry, and even threatened her when she refused to give him more money. "I was so stupid," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought he cared about me, but he's just a liar, a manipulator." Her tears didn't move me the way they once might have. I felt a pang of pity, sure, but there was too much anger between us for full sympathy. Still, I realized I needed her cooperation if we were going to deal with Chris. "Here's the deal," I said, cutting through her sobs. "We're going to the police. I've got enough evidence on him to make their jobs easy. You're going to give them everything you know, and you're going to do it willingly. If you don't, I'll go without you and make sure they see you as an accomplice." Her head snapped up.
Jaque, no.
"If he finds out, if you're scared of him, then all the more reason to get this over with," I said firmly. "He can't threaten you if he's in jail." Lisa hesitated, her fear palpable, but after a long silence, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." We made a plan to meet with the police the next day. But that night, something happened that made me question everything all over again. I was asleep on the couch, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day, when a loud banging at the door jolted me awake. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 2:13 a.m. I got up cautiously, peering through the peephole. My stomach dropped. It was Chris. He was standing on my porch, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, a menacing grin on his face. "Jake," he called out, his voice too loud for the quiet neighborhood. "We need to talk, man." My hands clenched into fists as I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. "What the hell are you doing here?" I growled. He leaned in, his grin widening. "Oh, I think you know why I'm here. Lisa's been running her mouth, hasn't she?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said coldly, my pulse pounding in my ears. Chris laughed, a low, unsettling sound. "Come on, Jake. Let's not play games. Lisa's a mess, man. A liar. You think you can trust her? She'll sell you out just like she did me." His words made my blood run cold, but I kept my expression neutral. "You're trespassing. Leave before I call the cops." Chris's smile faded, his face hardening. "You're making a big mistake, Jake," he said, his tone dripping with malice. "Stay out of my business, or you'll regret it." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I locked the door and leaned against it, my chest heaving. Lisa's story might have been true, but Chris had just made one thing clear. This wasn't going to end quietly. Chris showing up at my doorstep was the last straw. The next morning, I woke up with a clear goal. This man was going down. He thought he could intimidate me, thought he had the upper hand. He was wrong. I called Lisa and told her about Chris's late-night visit. She sounded terrified but agreed to stick to our plan. We were heading to the police station that afternoon. In the meantime, I started preparing. I went through every piece of evidence I had, every receipt, every email, and every screenshot. I organized it into a timeline that painted a clear picture of Chris's pattern. Meet vulnerable women, manipulate them, drain their finances, and then move on. Lisa wasn't his first victim, and she wouldn't be his last if we didn't stop him. When Lisa arrived at the house to go to the police station, she looked like a ghost of herself. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by a quiet nervousness that I almost didn't recognize. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as we got into the car. "You don't have a choice," I said bluntly. "Neither of us do. He's dangerous, Lisa. The only way to stop him is to expose him." At the police station, we met with a detective who listened intently as we laid everything out. Lisa told her side of the story, admitting to the money transfers but maintaining that she hadn't known about Chris's schemes until recently. The detective seemed skeptical at first but softened when I handed over the folder of evidence. "This is solid," he said, flipping through the pages. We've had reports about this guy before, but nothing concrete enough to act on. This changes things. Lisa's relief was visible, but I wasn't celebrating yet. Chris wasn't the type to back down quietly, and I knew he'd make a move once he realized the walls were closing in. I was right. That evening, I received an anonymous text. You think you've won, but you don't know who you're messing with. Back off, or you'll regret it. I stared at the screen, anger boiling in my chest. He was trying to scare me, but all he did was ignite something fierce inside me. I wasn't going to back down, not now, not ever. The next few days were tense. Lisa stayed with her parents, too afraid to be alone. I made sure the kids were safe, sticking to routines and keeping my guard up. But Chris wasn't done playing games. He started small, more texts, vague threats. Then, one night, I came home to find my car vandalized. The tires were slashed, and the word liar was spray-painted across the hood. I called the police immediately, and the detective assured me they were building a case. We've got a tail on him, he said. He's bound to slip up soon. But I couldn't just sit and wait. I decided to hit Chris where it hurt. Using some connections I'd made through my lawyer, I tracked down a few of his other victims. It didn't take long to find 3 women who were more than willing to come forward. Together, we compiled enough evidence to bury him. The final nail in the coffin came when Lisa remembered something crucial. Chris had made her sign over access to one of her old accounts under the guise of joint investments. A quick check revealed that account had been used to funnel money from other victims as well. When we handed this to the detective, his eyes lit up. This is it, he said. This is the break we needed. The next morning, Chris was arrested outside his gym. It wasn't dramatic, just a quiet scene of him being led away in handcuffs. But to me, it felt like a victory parade. Finally, the nightmare was over, or so I thought. When I got the call from the detective confirming Chris's arrest, I felt a weight lift off my chest. The man who had turned my life upside down was finally behind bars, and with the evidence we provided, his chances of slithering out of it were slim to none. But if I thought this was the end of the ordeal, I was dead wrong. Chris's arrest set off a chain reaction that I hadn't anticipated. For one, Lisa's involvement became a hot topic. While the detective assured me she wasn't being charged, the court of public opinion was another story. Once Chris's story hit the local news, her name was inevitably dragged into it. Whispers spread through our community, and people started treating her like she was just as guilty as he was. First, I didn't care. Lisa had brought this mess into our lives, and she deserved to face the consequences. But then I saw how it started affecting the kids. Emily came home from school one day crying because one of her classmates had overheard their parents calling Lisa a gold digger. Ben, too young to understand the words, picked up on the tension and started acting out at home. Lisa called me in tears one night. "Jake, I don't know what to do," she said. "The kids, they're suffering because of me. I never meant for any of this to happen." I wanted to yell at her, to remind her that this was all her fault, but the truth was staring me in the face. We were still a family, broken as it was. I couldn't let my anger at Lisa overshadow what was best for Emily and Ben. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I agreed to meet Lisa for coffee and discuss how we could handle things moving forward, for the kids' sake. When we sat down, she looked more humbled than I'd ever seen her, like all the fight and defiance had been drained from her. "I'm sorry," she said before I could even speak. "Not just for the affair, but for everything. For being so selfish, for not thinking about how my actions would hurt you and the kids. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sink in. I didn't know if I believed her, but I could see she was genuinely trying. "This isn't about us anymore," I said finally. "It's about them. They deserve to have some stability, Lisa. We need to work together to give them that." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I'll do better. I promise." We came up with a plan to present a united front for the kids. We agreed to split custody temporarily, and Lisa moved into an apartment close to their school to make transitions easier. I still didn't trust her, but I could see she was trying to rebuild her life from the ashes. As for Chris, The man who tried to ruin everything was facing a slew of charges, including fraud and intimidation. One of the other victims I'd found testified that he'd threatened her as well, which added more weight to the case against him. He wasn't getting out anytime soon. But even with him gone, the scars he left behind lingered. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying every moment, wondering how I'd missed the signs. There were days when I felt like a failure for letting my family fall apart. Yet slowly but surely, life started to rebuild itself. The kids adjusted to the new routine, and I threw myself into being the best dad I could be. I took them on weekend hikes, helped Emily with her art projects, and taught Ben how to ride a bike. Lisa stayed out of my way, focusing on therapy and trying to make amends. She even joined a support group for women who'd been manipulated by men like Chris. We weren't the same people we'd been before all of this. We never would be. But for the first time in months, I started to believe we might come out of it stronger in our own ways. But even as things settled, one question kept haunting me. Could I ever truly forgive her? It's been 6 months since Chris was arrested. Life isn't perfect, but it's moving forward, and for that, I'm grateful. The court finalized the divorce last month. I got full custody of the kids, though Lisa has visitation rights. It's not the life I envisioned when we got married, but I've come to accept that sometimes things break in ways you can't fix. Forgiving Lisa, though, that's been the hardest part. Some days I think I'm close. I see how hard she's working to be a better mom, how much she's changed since the affair. She's more patient with the kids, more present in their lives. She's even started volunteering at local women's shelters, trying to help others who've been trapped in situations like hers. Other days, the bitterness creeps in. I think about all the lies, the betrayal, the way she shrugged off the life we'd built together. It's hard to reconcile the woman she was with the woman she's trying to be now. For my own peace of mind, I've been going to therapy. I didn't realize how much I'd buried. Resentments, self-doubt, even guilt for not seeing the cracks in our marriage sooner. My therapist said something that stuck with me. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm working on it. As for the kids, they're my anchor. Emily's back to her bubbly self, spending hours drawing and making up stories about the characters she creates. Ben's become obsessed with dinosaurs and insists on sharing random facts at every meal. They're my world, and everything I do now is for them. Lisa and I are civil. We text about the kids and have brief, polite conversations during handoffs. She's asked me a few times if we could ever be friends, but I've always sidestepped the question. I'm not sure if I want to be friends with her. I'm not sure if I ever can. And Chris? He's where he belongs, behind bars. The trial was quick, and he didn't even try to deny the charges. He got 8 years for fraud with additional time for the intimidation charges. Knowing he's out of our lives is a relief I can't put into words. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It hurts like hell, yes, but it doesn't have to break you. To anyone reading this who's been through something similar, here's my advice. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Protect yourself. Love doesn't mean blind loyalty, especially when it's not reciprocated. And most importantly, don't let someone else's mistakes destroy your ability to believe in yourself. I'm still healing, and I know it'll take time. But for the first time in what feels like forever, I can breathe again. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over, and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.